Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Talk with CastleHill. On today's session, we're going to talk with Pete Martin about some challenges in managing your RSA Archer environment, and a little bit about a solution that we have to help with that, a product we call MetaDetective. So welcome, Pete, and why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Pete Martin. So I'm a principal and RSA Archer Practice Lead here at CastleHill. Been with CastleHill for 3.5 years now, and been working in the Archer space for 10 years, and risk and compliance, or GRC, for roughly 13 years now.
Back when you were
So
two, that was when you
yeah,
started, right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
something like that.
Yeah, perfect. So thanks for joining me today, Pete. So we're going to talk a little bit about something which you know very well, some of the challenges in managing an RSA Archer environment. What are those challenges? What would cause people to stay up at night? Let's get away from sort of the performance side of things or some of the other quirks that we all know and love. But just actually managing the environment. What are the challenges that people see?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of challenges that are kind of self-induced, as far as trying to track who's doing what, trying to do things consistently, though, so that you're not so resource dependent on if things change, making sure that or need to change, that you're reaching out to a single resource that already knows that maybe that instance of the platform or that program within the platform, and get that expert, quote unquote, for that solution to be the one that supports it primarily. So that's a big part of it, right? Is having that visibility and consistency, so that ideally any resource can come in and support whatever area of the platform is necessary. That's a big part
including
of
when
it.
including when we get to come in and start doing it as well, right? Try to
Yeah, I mean,
find
and
out
that, and
what
that's true.
somebody
I mean,
did.
whether it's onboarding a new resource, or yeah, I mean, somebody new taking ownership of the platform overall and trying to bring in help to say, hey, help me deconstruct how this monstrosity has been put together. Because Archer is only as good as the people that are, implementing and supporting it, right?
Yep.
So
Things change over time. You don't know why, where they changed, any of those sort of fun things, right?
yeah, I mean,
So
that's a big part of it too. Is there's a big reason that they have set of duties, but with that, that means that a lot of times it's harder to know. You get people that are implementing, building out things in their dev environment, implementing in your model environment or your UAT environment, but maybe they're not the people that actually are able to promote or even support their production environment as well.
yep.
So that can be a big hurdle depending on the maturity of the controls that they have over their platform support.
Yeah. Yep. I know a lot of times when I think about this, I think about it from the scenarios of, the poor analyst who's been told to, write up the requirement for changing a field and in some module and doesn't realize it's a cross-reference to, 15 other places and it's on these 3 reports and all sorts of things like that is, that's another one I think of those challenges that we end up in the Archer world of how do you
Yeah,
find
I
that
mean, the
information?
sort of the ripple effect of what can seemingly be some minor change, right? And
Mhm.
well, this one group wants me to change this risk rating calculation. Oh, it doesn't seem like a big deal, right? Well,
Yeah.
depending on who else is using that, or if you're adding a rating or modifying a rating, and maybe there's some other process that's consuming it, and the values need to align, for sure,
Yeah.
that can be a big thing. Or even
Yep.
access, right? I mean, one thing that's really hard to get a grasp on coming into a platform without any knowledge about it is, how is the access constructed in here? Even if you are familiar with the platform, if you haven't touched it for a while, you might not remember or know any other access that's been built into a program, maybe even that you've solely sort of built or supported.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. All sorts of different fun that we get. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a big part of what we get brought in to do. Just is just not even so much strategy. Excuse me, strategy. It's just, can you help us figure out how this thing works, and
yeah.
trying to unravel that big bowl of spaghetti that is Archer, because it's can be very complex for what seems to be a somewhat simple application to build and support in, right? Compared to something else where you might need more development skills to support it. Archer is kind of more of a drag and drop thing with some pretty basic Excel-like calculation features, which makes it great. You don't need somebody that has an IT or computer science background to come in and build it and support it. But the flexibility that it provides and the ease it makes to do that means that that back end is really complex as well. And it can be a pretty complicated thing to figure out. I mean, I'm trying to recall the exact number, and I wouldn't be able to remember it off anyway, but I mean, the Archer database has something like 400 plus tables in it, which is insane. And that's not because of, well, we have a large instance, we have, 100 applications and 50 questionnaires. No, I mean, that number is fairly static, right? It's just the complexity of the Archer design and how they make it easy to build it complicates that backend, that backend database structure.
Yep. You made an interesting point a minute ago about the not needing an IT or a development background. It just sparked the thought that one of the challenges is that sometimes Archer configuration teams or analysts don't have the rigor that goes along with a long development process either, where they have to very, very carefully manage code and very carefully manage branches and bringing information all together and continuous packaging and all the tools that are in the agile tool set aren't things that we typically are able to do successfully within the Archer world.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's no GitLab. I mean, it's all can be kind of self-contained, right? The process to package up changes is self-contained within Archer, and you just literally need to extract it. I know a lot of that even can be automated now, which is kind of scary. That because of the like they say, with great power comes great responsibility, and there's a lot that can go wrong if you do things incorrectly. Even something as simple as not manually mapping field values, right? If you have a request and we need to add 3 values to this values list. Okay, great. And so you do it manually, right? Because you don't want to go through the process of building a package. Maybe they have a formal process. They use ServiceNow to create a CR, whatnot. So maybe these smaller non-packaged items you can promote, if you can promote it manually, you don't need to go through all those hoops that might be more typical with a larger deployment or larger update within the system. But that next time you come in and package, you have to be conscious about that. You have to make sure you're mapping and say, well, so you're not recreating or creating new instances of those values, which might impact reporting or other backend processes, or just make an interesting user experience, right?
Yep. The famous bracket 1 or parentheses 1 and parentheses 2
exactly.
and parentheses 3.
Yep. No, it's a very common thing, even with packaging, where that still occurs. And at best, it just takes a while to clean that up, because if records are tied to those bad values, right, you got to go and clean them all out and remap them to the new version of the value or the correct version. It can be a very time-consuming process for what's a very simple thing to do.
Yep. And welcome to your fresh audit issue as well.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's when you get, okay, great. Now you need these stringent controls on how you deploy changes. And I mean, Archer, from my perspective, isn't meant to be managed that way, right? It's meant to be a quick, flexible tool that's easy to update. I mean, that's a lot of the benefit, and you're taking away a lot of the benefit of using the platform if you implement these really stringent, well, we're just going to do quarterly releases, nothing goes through on an ad hoc basis, right? I mean, then you have to get all these steps of approval and get some offshore team to implement it off hours. I mean, for something as simple as a quick calculation update, or we just need to add a small, a quick text field that has no other implications, not in a report, not calculated. I mean, I think that's what pushes a lot of people off of wanting to use it, right? When they don't see that benefit from a business line perspective. It's like, well, gosh, you're telling me it's going to take 3 months to get my risk rating calculation updated, and I got this audit issue that says we need to change how we address this risk. I mean, that's terrible. So
fix the spelling of a field. It only takes 6 months.
Exactly. Right. I mean, that's. So go ahead.
So what kind of solutions have we seen? So I mean, I know there's many different ways that people have tried to solve this. What have we seen?
So some people are just, at least some clients, I should say, some are very regimented in how they document their their requirements and their configuration, but that's a very tedious thing to maintain, right? So it's great if you want to go and create a list of all your calculated fields and your notifications and whatnot, but that data is only as good as the people that are doing the configuration and how they remember to go and make the updates afterwards, right? So it's a nice thought in process, but it's very time consuming. It's, a lot of human resource capital that goes into maintaining artifacts. So that's one thing. I mean, obviously you can always pay people like us to come in to do it. We're happy to do that and help you figure out how this thing's been, how Humpty's been put together and deconstruct them. But that's, it can be a time consuming process too, because, whether it's us or some other consultant or contractor that's coming in to help provide that analysis, or even members of your own team. I mean, it's just a really time intensive process to dig into that. There's, again, just coming back to the complexity of the back end of Archer, there's no simple way to say, well, tell me how this field, who has access to this field? I mean, that's something that should be so simple, but it's really not. It depends on the scope of the record, the status of the record. Well, just because they're in this group, are they assigned to the record? I mean, there's so many elements that can come into it that get really complex. And again, there's no real magic button so far that answers all, or addresses all of those problems and says, here's one thing. And I think we're, what we're getting into is as close as it gets, but that says, here's everything you need to know about the platform.
Right.
But just because of the complexity in the layers, especially when it comes to like access control and how, there's sort of a 3-tier access structure, that's the really complicated element to get into. But yeah, I mean,
Let's say I know, in many of the charge conferences and things like that, this comes up, and I think last year when we were down in Florida, I know some folks demonstrated a very complicated application that they had built up over a period of time. How well do those work? What's the challenge there of building up some of those applications that people have built in the past?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of hands-on experience, but I've seen some of those demos as well. And I mean, it's a support, right? Because a lot of those things are custom, or you're paying probably a decent amount of money to get access to them. And even if you do, it's custom. It's what that company who built it, if it's not an in-house thing, it's what they think matters and how they wanted it. I think it should work. Yeah, it's
and a bunch of ODAs.
Especially if you're bringing that content into Archer, yes, it can be a costly thing from a licensing perspective as well. Yep. And I'm sure there's multiple people that have or multiple companies out there, whether they're consultant companies or whatever, that have different ways of doing it. But again, I don't know that there's better answers. They're not necessarily a single wrong answer, a single right answer, but there are better answers for sure.
All right, well, tell me what the better answers are. That's a great lead-in. Thanks. Nice segue.
Yeah, and maybe I'm biased. No, I think from what we've seen, the MetaDetective is a big win for anybody that has to support an Archer environment. So it's basically giving the details. It's a way of using multiple APIs to go into Archer and extract different meta content about that, whether it's about the groups and roles in the platform or the applications, the modules, the fields in there, the notifications, the reports. And the beautiful thing about it is as these items are referenced elsewhere, as you have a field in a report, a field in a notification, a field in a data feed, a group in a permission field, within the UI of our MetaDetective app, it's all sort of hyperlinked together, and it's a nice, easy, navigable process to go and see, all right, hey, if I want to change something, where's the impact, right? Or if I want to identify, we've packaged this new app up or an existing app up. Let's see what that ripple effect has been as a result of that package, what changes have come in. Or if you have a process where, you have some sort of data lake, right? And you're trying to pull, you want to make sure that you're constantly pulling in fields from an application. Like, well, we need to know when a new field's created. Great. MetaDetective has a great way of doing that, as well as, especially if you have very stringent implementation practices and controls, right? If you have a strong Sega duties structure or whatever, and you need to know whenever a change is made in production, great. This tells you every change that's made, whether it's adding a field, modifying a field, adding an application, what have you. It has a great way of identifying that information and monitoring those details.
Yep. Let's you mentioned a couple different things there, so let's break it down maybe by sort of the user communities that we would see, or the participants, so to speak. So what is MetaDetective and our GRC management app give an analyst, right? A typical business analyst who's working with the business to update some or enhance a particular module or implement a particular module. Where do they get the benefit?
A lot of that can be just so one thing that MetaDetective does is it can monitor multiple environments, right? And so one big thing is you can start assessing, something as simple as, are these GUIDs aligned, right? And do a comparison and say, hey, we have this package going up. We know some fields were made manually. Or I should say, we probably deployed this package. We want to make sure that all of our GUIDs got aligned, right? For all these fields that maybe 6 months ago somebody created manually, again, didn't do the package process, which is okay. But eventually you want to get those things aligned, right? And so you can use it to identify, especially if you have any custom objects or other items where those GUIDs matter, because they can be very important for sure. So it can help you identify between environments. Hey, are the GUIDs aligned here, or do we have this field in our environments, or is the calculation for this field identical in all environments, right? And making sure that these things are all of our ducks in a row. I would say most importantly, post production, post some sort of prod deployment, but certainly you want to make sure, because there's always things, ideally there's always change going on in your dev environment and subsequently updates in your model. But you really want to make sure after you deploy something that your dev through production is all aligned.
Yep. So that seems more like the development operations side of it as well. So because that I think is a key part of it. So how about the configuration person, right? Where are they getting the value? What are they able to see?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So some of it is just your day-to-day support. It's like, hey, what fields are active? Are notifications active? It's something simple like that. Or, hey, what groups or roles have access to a certain module, right? I'm going to go and start making a change here. I don't know much about it. How do I get some understanding so that I don't just come in like a bull in a china shop and start breaking what other people do? Because it does cover as well too, like rules and actions, and getting some information into there too, which is obviously a big element to how you control access within the platform.
So instead of just clicking on it and seeing it, you have to go and dig through all the fields and look at the calcs and take notes and do other fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you can always. Certainly, I'd always advocate for if you're first being introduced to something that you have to support a program, going in as an end user, clicking around a bit, getting familiar, because you're never going to be able to easily pick that up just by looking at like the event rules and actions. There's especially with the way that people, from one configuration person to the next, they inconsistently configure how things are controlled, which is another story. That's another webinar.
That's true.
But yes, it's certainly helpful to get, all right, what am I getting my hands into here? Getting the lay of the land first, so that, like I said, you just don't break anything. It allows you, maybe prompts questions for somebody else on that configuration team or somebody in the program saying, hey, just starting to dig into this. I see this calculation is set up like this. Is this accurate? Maybe it's referencing an inactive field. Maybe it's referencing an off layout field and you don't know if it should be, right? Any number of items could cause that configuration person want to step back and maybe prompt for a question.
Right. Yep. Things that are hard to find for sure.
Exactly. Yep.
How about the testing community? Testers need to want to, want to know what they need to get ready to start testing. How does it help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for, whether it's identifying just the things that are in scope, like with a package saying, all right, it's pretty easy to identify, well, this is what we've packaged in. Otherwise, certainly identifying the different groups and roles maybe that are tied to an application saying, hey, all right, you gave me 3 user accounts in these 3 groups, but, it looks like there are 5 different groups that are aligned to access to this solution. What's going on here? What about these other 2, right?
Yep.
So that's certainly one way that they can use it. Fields, right? All right, here's a list of all the fields. Hey, in my testing, I'm not seeing this large block of fields. What's going on here? Or maybe there's a value in a status field that
Yep.
no matter what workflow path I take, I'm not getting there. Should this be in this field? Is it, how do I get to that status if it's truly an applicable status?
Yep. Cool. Let's try management. So in your put on your team management hat, how does it help there?
There's a few things. I mean, I think we've covered, and it's still probably one of the bigger use cases is just knowing who's doing what or who pushed things. I mean, specifically like to monitoring production.
Yeah.
When are things coming in and who's doing it, right? If Pete's making changes to an application, but he has no sort of change requests, no open tickets tied to that module, why are you making this change, right? I mean, ideally, you would have, at least some sort of ticketing process. Yes, I advocate for allowing people to be able to make manually changes, minor manual changes throughout the environment.
Yep.
But those changes shouldn't just be from a phone call, right? Everything should be documented and be able to tie it back to a request, an approved request, ideally. And then just, again, too, you think of something like, hey, I noticed 2 different resources are making changes to our business process application. Are you guys talking to each other, right? Do you have any idea that you're potentially stomping on each other's toes? Do you have a plan for how these changes are going to be deployed, right? Because if they're on different cadence, if they're the release timeline for those different changes don't align, how do we make sure we don't errantly promote something that's in flight?
Right. Yeah,
Right.
that's
So it's
that's always been a fun one.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, in general coverage of
Right.
who's working on what and making sure that
Yep.
everybody kind of stays in their lane as much as possible.
That would help Audit get more comfortable with things too, I imagine, being knowing that there's a good awareness of how that's happening.
Yep.
So
yeah, I mean, you
which is
can
good.
there's ways of creating groups and roles so that people can only modify applications that they're aligned to, but a lot of times, again, that's just a really difficult concept to implement.
Yeah.
So in light of that, putting in monitoring tools to ensure, to at least try to track who's working on what is probably a little bit easier in practice.
And it's automated as opposed to a manual support. It's a lot
Exactly.
of better control.
Yep.
So cool. So what's it take to deploy this inside of, from an Archer perspective? Is there a lot big overhead? We talked before about people who make their own custom applications that get pretty complicated. Is this the same thing? Is it different?
No, I mean, it's so far it seems like a pretty simple deployment and haven't had any concerns there. It's mostly just an executable file that you put on the server. I believe it'd be, sorry, probably cutting this up. One of the Archer servers and get it there, and it just builds up specific tables in a database to track and pull in using multiple APIs, some Archer APIs, some extended APIs to get that content from the database on a scheduled basis. You can turn it on, monitor the database as frequently or infrequently as you want, whether it's daily, hourly. You can do that, run those jobs as frequently as you want. And it's pretty simple. Again, with the tables in Archer being static, that's one of the benefits of this, right? There's not a lot of customization that needs to happen because Archer is Archer. And unless you're running like a 5x version, that'd be a different story. You have different problems if that's your case. So
Yeah, that's true. Yep. And I know it works for any version of Archer, any in terms of whether it's hosted on-prem or it's hosted by RSA or in the SaaS cloud. I know there's some variations there, but it will work with any of those pieces. And again, some variation depending upon the specific environment, just because of the nature of how they're locked down.
Yep.
But anything else you would leave it? And we're just about up on time. Anything else that you'd leave folks with relative to the whole challenge and how to solve it?
I think there's some other benefits too. We talk about getting everything into this MetaDetective app, which again is a great tool, but there's, for those maybe more mature platforms, you can use, potentially like a data feed to bring the content from that Archer MD database and bring it into Archer. And so all of a sudden now you're getting automatically maintained content, meta content for your applications, your solutions, your groups, your roles. And so that opens up the door to other items as well. You can build a ticketing process and have them select the solution or the application that they want to request a change to, right? Which is awesome, because if you assign owners from an approval perspective to those solutions or applications, also now you have a hands-free way of getting approved tickets through your system. Groups roles, you can more easily provide access certifications, because if you bring that content into Archer between contacts and an application to track your groups and your roles, all of that can be auto-maintained, and your certifications could be automatically managed for everything within Archer, outside of like named permission fee, but anything that's group and role based, it's easy. So it's a great tool to bring whatever you want to monitor, monitoring data feeds. Again, there's a whole nother branch of conversation we could get into there about the benefits of bringing this content into Archer and really expanding the use of it from an administration and a really a program perspective as well, as those people can see, finally see some different things. You can use it as a data dictionary, right? If you put field descriptions in, or even allow the users to self-manage that information, all of a sudden IT is not the people that have to be the gatekeeper for this content. You can give that power to people in the programs.
The SMEs who know all, right? That
Exactly.
one person who knows everything about it. You get away from that and document it.
Exactly. Cool. Yep. Put the onus on the people that actually own the program, and it's so there's a lot more capabilities that come with that, and bringing that information in, and using Archer MD to source that data is key, because then it's just, it's accurate, it's a scheduled process, and it's awesome. It's a technical term.
That's right. That was very qualitative.
Yes, thank you.
For folks who want more information, please go to castlehillrisk.com, look up MetaDetective or GRC management, and you'll find more information about it, or of course call us or reach out to us. We can give you some more information as well. But really, thanks a lot, Pete, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me for Coffee Talk with CastleHill.
Awesome. Thank you.